The one that really breaks my back, which is the divorce. You
Wow.
know, so I had those sort of 3 life awakeners. It's like, boom, cancer, bankruptcy, and then a divorce.
What was the time span on that? This is maybe my masculine mind's give me some time because
It's literally 1 year after the other. It went like because I got that in 2006, the cancer, and then 2007, the bankruptcy. It was maybe like 16 months later that the bankruptcy hits, and then within maybe 12 months later, the divorce.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's like I was kind of stabilizing. It's like boom, 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 And I do this exercise to find out what my purpose of my soul is. And it's a simple writing assignment that you're just supposed to write on a piece of paper, what is my soul's purpose? And free form write until you hit a sequence of words that moves you to the core. And so I'm in this process. I knew about it, but finally decided to do it on an evening. Took a couple hours. And when I finally hit those words, giving, business, soul, all of a sudden I have a cathartic hit and I start weeping. And I'm just like, what is going on right now? I don't understand why I'm weeping.
So much intentional energy that is built here. Their body can function again. It can breathe again. It can move energy and oxygen. But the treatment book is like this, like it's massive. I've met so many patients over the years who were not living lives with vitality. They were living, but it wasn't vital. Francisco, welcome to the New Human Experience podcast, except this time I'm in your space, in your studio. We recorded on your podcast the other day. Thanks for lending me your guy. He's amazing. And yeah, this beautiful space and the energy. And so, yeah, really excited to jam with you today.
Yeah, thanks. This is a new for me as well, man. I've never been on this side of the table. So thanks for also making yourself available to do a podcast and, have a nice, fun conversation as we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those that don't know, I met you 2018 at our friend Emily. We were just chatting about our mutual friend Emily.
Shout out to Emily.
Yeah, we were in Sedona doing a men's retreat, and it was incredible. And yeah, it was really beautiful meeting you and getting to kind of see what you're up to in the world and going through the layers a little bit more. And you were speaking on business, but business in a different way. Business, and I would even say it's a new way, but it feels almost like old ways and new ways combined, kind of like my Chinese medicine practice, like ancient theory and practice, but bringing it together in the modern world of where we're going and what's possible. And so, we're in the office here for anybody watching. There's a, Giving Business Soul is the name of an organization that you run and founded. And I know you've been involved in many different aspects of business over the years, but also your own mystical, spiritual path of, I don't even know what to say, just like polishing that sword, And so, yeah, could you maybe just share a little bit about you, whatever feels inspired about Giving Business Soul, and we'll just, dive into all of it and, kind of tease out all the elements here over the next little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, thank you for that. And, I'll kind of maybe share a little bit about how Giving Business Soul really came to be. I'm one of those fortunate, individuals who had grown up in a family of entrepreneurs. So my father is a really successful entrepreneur, my uncle as well. And so when I'm 13 years old, my uncle hands me a first business book. It's called How to Win Customers and Keep Them for Life. And he gives it to me. I devour the book. And
at 13?
At 13.
Okay.
So that is an anomaly.
It's in your blood.
It's in my blood. I'm like, this is great, And at that time, he had a vast library and was already a successful entrepreneur. And one of the things he told me is like, listen, successful CEOs and founders of organizations and companies, they read 6 to 8 books a month. And he had a big library. He was a big student himself. And so he would just hand me books. I mean, stuff on Walmart, Microsoft, Google. I mean, just anything and everything. And I just devoured it. I loved it. And I stayed on a really rapid pace of accelerated learning in the domain of business. And just like with that domain, you also get into personal development and health and everything else. And, I just stayed on a really big pace of learning as much as I could. I go to BYU and get a degree in economics. And when I graduate, obviously the idea is probably go back and work in the family business. My father at that time's got a chain of small restaurants, 6, 7 restaurants. And I get back in and we start working together, and, him and I are very strong individuals, and, two Capricorns kind of started clashing heads a bit. I got all these great ideas from college, and I just kind of I was just zealous, I was like, hey, let's do this and let's do that. And he's just like, son, slow your roll. and so, it went well, but I just decided for myself, I said, you know what, I think I'm going to go and venture on to my own path. And so I kind of broke away from the castle, as I like to say. I have 6 other brothers and sisters, on that side of the family. And I decided to get into the mortgage industry. I was, at the time, my wife at the time had a brother who was in the mortgage industry, David Garcia, and he shows me a check, and it's about $4,000 of a commission check. And at the time, I'm working at my father's restaurant, making $40,000 a year. And at that time, it was decent coming out of college. And he shows me one check, and I said, how long did it take you? He's like, that's about a month's work. I said, how many can you do in 1 month? He says, as many as you want. I was like, wait a minute. Let me talk to your boss, and there begins the process. And when I sit down with those brokers, they said, hey, if you work an honest 40 hours a week in this industry, you'll never make less than $100,000. And at that time, I was working 70 to 80. I just kind of have a very strong work ethic coming from an immigrant family. And I'm fluent in Spanish, economically inclined, and fluent in finances. And so I decided to take the leap, and I jump in, and it was kind of like a shoo-in, Kevin. It was just like, it just worked for me. And they hand me the phone. I just start calling people, and I start calling my Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters, and immediately everyone's very receptive to my conversation. And, within a very short period of time, I'm starting to do pretty well. And and I'm seeing the office and the way that it's ran. And given that I had read so many, foundational business books, I'm like, I think I can do this better, And so within a short time, I become the top producer. And eventually all my college friends are like, what are you making? And what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not selling drugs. I'm selling mortgages, man. And they started coming over. And within a short time, we had this little team inside of a big mortgage brokerage office. And we just start climbing and growing. And within a couple years, I decided to open up my own mortgage company. And it was a nice trajectory. I applied everything that I had been learning and everything that I understood about leadership. And, within 2 years after opening, that office, my partner and I, we scale it to about 85 employees. We got 4 different offices through Southern California. We're bringing in millions of dollars of annual revenues and doing really, really well. And life is, treating me pretty good at that point. I married my college sweetheart. I got my first son already. And, and then all of a sudden.
How old were you? Sorry to interrupt. How old were you at that time? Just because I'm curious around the trajectory, right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. So when I get into the mortgage industry, it's 22. I'm 22. And then by 2024, I opened my first office. And then by 26, we literally have almost 85 employees.
Wow.
Because rates were coming down.
Yeah.
They were up in the 90s, and then they were starting to come down. And so it was just kind of right place, right time. And the Spanish market was underserved. And so most of my friends were bilingual. And so we started to cater to that market. And, one thing leads to another. And all of a sudden we're growing and, it's busting at the seams, and we keep opening offices. And, and again, I think having the grounding of all that leadership and watching my uncle and my father talk about cultures and leadership and, the different ways that you got to act as a leader. And, it just started working. And
all the ingredients.
Yeah.
And starting at 13, because in my logical brain's like, wow, that's a lot to take on and guide at 26, but you didn't start at 22. You started at 13 in that way, and just being in a lineage of entrepreneurs. Then it wouldn't have seemed like extraordinary to be an entrepreneur and start a business and these types of things. Whereas like myself and a lot of friends of mine, not coming from entrepreneurial background. So when somebody would break away from the pack a little bit, I'm going to start my own business, people would often think, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Get the secure job, get the paycheck, orient to security. That's crazy. What if it doesn't work? And, you know, these types of things. So I'm just kind of acknowledging the ingredients that you built over that time to bring you. And there's still no guarantees. There's still risk and learning. And so, yeah, that's already like a beautiful foundation, because I didn't even know all of that with you. And okay, 26 and you're growing.
And well said. Yeah. Cause I mean, literally at 13, you know, I start working at the nursery, and then at 14, I'm a dishwasher at my father's restaurant, and then a busboy, and then, you know, and then it's just, so I was primed. All the ingredients were there.
Yeah.
I had served tables at 18, so I had a servant mentality, and it was like Steve Jobs says, it's like you can never connect the dots forward, but then you look back and go, oh wow, I was literally designed for this. And so yeah, it was a great trajectory. And at that time, even my uncle, my father and I were doing similar revenues, you know, because mortgage was just expanding and growing. And then, that's around 27 years old. And then that's when life throws the first curveball.
Okay.
Right? And life throws the first curveball. I'm diagnosed with a stage 3 cancer.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm a very healthy individual. And all of a sudden I'm in Hawaii, I'm taking a shower, and I feel a huge lump in my right testicle. And all of a sudden I'm like, what's going on? And I had just read the Lance Armstrong book.
No kidding.
Yeah. Literally like 6 months prior. So it was just kind of like immediately I read that book, and all of a sudden I'm showering, this is happening, and I'm traveling in Hawaii. The internet's barely coming online. I'm doing all the research, and I'm going, oh shit. And I'm pretty sure this does not feel like a tiny little lump. This feels like something big.
Yeah.
Get back to the mainland and go to my general practitioner. Eventually sends me to the oncologist, and you know, I go and do the tests, and I get that phone call. You know, I'm in my office, still remember the day very clearly. I pick up that phone, and he's like, yeah, you're at least at a stage 2. We got to see if it's already traveled into your lungs and into your brain. It's all over your lymphs. And, you know, I'm like, hang up the phone, and I start doing the Kobe Bryant fist pump. And I'm like, I got this, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and I thought to myself, in reading all those books, I'm like, all great leaders need great adversity. And I think this is mine, because I've just had too easy in my mind of a trajectory.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, okay, you know, and I go back, take the test, and I had them all over my lungs. And luckily they hadn't reached my brain. But, you know, immediately went to do all the tests. I actually wanted to approach it naturally. I was like, you know, just like, no, I don't want to go through the chemo. But at the time, my wife was pregnant with our second. Yeah. And I already had my 1-year-old son, and, you know, the chances of success were pretty decent. So I was like, all right.
What a position to be in at 27, father, leader, business guy, all those pieces. And that's a curveball, to say the least.
Yeah.
And deciding what you wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I went for it, and, you know, shaved my head, did all that stuff in preparation for all the chemo. And luckily, I mean, I was a business owner. So my partner and the entire organization, I mean, they literally, we had our best months when I was gone.
How was that for your ego?
Exactly.
Wait
I was like, it was actually really good. I was like, you know what? I think I want to do more of this. You know what I mean? In the sense, like, I think I was getting in the organization's way. You know, and I started realizing, you know what? Like, there's actually, when you give people autonomy, you give them, you know, direction and orientation, they actually perform really, really well for you. Mm-hmm. And so it was more of a message than anything. And so that was wonderful. I was able to focus on my situation and get healthy. And by the grace of God, obviously it took about 3 months, very heavy chemo, came out of that. And as I came out of it, you know, at that point I had been very structured in my way of approaching life. And all of a sudden you get your own life dangled in front of your eyes, and I just put it in high gear afterwards.
Yeah.
And I just said, let's buy this multi-million-dollar house on the hill overlooking the ocean. We only get one chance at this. And so I overstretched. And when the next year, when the grenade goes off in the mortgage industry, that
was that 2008?
Yeah.
Is that where you're, yeah.
2007.
2007.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that grenade goes off, and, you know, we're kind of stretched personally, and on the company where I'm literally in high gear trying to grow as fast as I can. And, immediately it's like, whoa. And we tried to, cut back and do everything we could, but it was just a bomb that went off.
Well, and for those that don't know, watch the movie The Big Short.
Exactly.
It'll tell you what you need to know about what we're talking about.
Exactly, right. I was front and center on that thing.
Wow.
And, so immediately within a few months, we had to file a multi-million-dollar business bankruptcy.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, now I go luckily I was able to sell the building we had just bought, and I sold the house, and I got out from underneath about $5 million of debt. And, just sort of kind of restructure myself. And I was like, okay, as long as I have my beautiful wife and two children, I'm going to be okay,
Yeah.
And then the one that really breaks my back, which is the divorce.
Wow.
So I had those sort of 3 life awakeners. It's like, boom, cancer, bankruptcy, and then a divorce.
What was the time span on that? This is maybe my masculine mind's give me some time, because
it's literally 1 year after the other. It went like because I got that in 2006, the cancer, and then 2007, the bankruptcy. It was maybe like 16 months later that the bankruptcy hits. And then within maybe 12 months later, the divorce.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's like I was kind of stabilizing. It's like boom, 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 and
testing the foundation.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. But it was beautiful. You look back at it now, and some of those things were some of the greatest gifts that I received. And it was there in 2009. I'm in a depression, trying to figure out what the heck just happened. How do I sort of stand myself up, dust myself off? And I do this exercise to find out what my purpose of my soul is. And it's a simple writing assignment that you're just supposed to write on a piece of paper, what is my soul's purpose? And free form write until you hit a sequence of words that moves you to the core. And so I'm in this process. I knew about it, but finally decided to do it on an evening. Took a couple hours. And when I finally hit those words, giving, business, soul, all of a sudden I have a cathartic hit. And I start weeping. And I'm just like, what is going on right now? I don't understand why I'm weeping. But I knew that based on the exercise and what it was supposed to be, I knew that this was important and that this was connected to the purpose of my soul and why I was here. Excuse me. And so I tucked it close to my heart and just continued walking. And the next year, I found myself at the University of Santa Monica learning about obtaining a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And that's really where the deepening began. At that point, I had read a lot of sort of entry-level spiritual books like the Deepak Chopras and Wayne Dyer and fantastic literature and Eckhart Tolle. And when I got into that program, one of the things that they said to me, they said, hey, your outer experience will always be a reflection of your inner reality. Your outer experience will always be a reflection of that inner reality. And so when they said that, I immediately understood. It's like, I understand why I can't gain momentum anymore right now. Because right there, I just would yo-yo. I'm a master at mortgage, and I just couldn't get velocity anymore because the world was reflecting my shame, my inadequacy, my sense that I lost everything, And so I decided to join the program. And, as I started to heal my internal world, then the external expansion started to occur. And that was the first time I was like, wow. Because what was really interesting to me there, Kevin, was like, I had read, I'm probably at that point, maybe a few hundred books. Because I didn't listen to music. I literally, everything was on Audible, and all I would do was read. That's all I would do. And my wife and my kids, that was it. And so all of a sudden, I'd go into spiritual psychology, and there's an entire domain of knowledge that I hadn't even poked. And I was like, wait a minute, this whole spiritual psychology and all this sort of shadow work and all these different things. And I was like, this is amazing. And I just went sort of all in on that. And as I started to heal more and more, it just started to create more external expansion. And the deeper I went, into like childhood traumas and different things like that, then my relationship started to change. My ability to connect with people started to change. There was a softness that started to come around because I was so masculine, goal-oriented, go as fast as you can. I couldn't really relate to people at that point because I had done so well, so fast. It was like people that were struggling a bit, with finances. I was like, well, you just got to do X, Y, and Z, and,
Yeah.
and then with your relationship, you just got to take your wife on a date and do this, I had it all figured out, and all of a sudden I'm realizing that I had a bunch of trauma and that I was actually operating from my trauma. And when I first started to see it, it just started to really break me down, soften me up, make me cry a lot, realizing that I had stepped over relationships and done a lot of different things that I wasn't proud of. And as I started to heal more and more, I really felt my heart begin to open more and more. And I graduated in 2012, and I already had this sort of giving business soul concept. And I said, listen, I've already been in the mortgage industry 12 years, but this time I want to do something different, And so I resurrected myself, and on December 21st, 2012, I decided to give light and birth the Mortgage Phoenix Group. Because if you remember, that was the time that the Mayans said we were going to be crossing over into this entirely new time period. And I wanted the Mortgage Phoenix to be a representation of that. An entirely new breed of organization that would bring masculine and feminine together within one organizational structure. And that was the genesis of the Mortgage Phoenix Group. And what that really represented for me was that I didn't just want my organization to be profitable. I wanted it to be philanthropic. I wanted it to stand for the betterment of humanity. And so what I started to do, I started to tithe. Every time we funded a mortgage, I would tithe towards the building of a home for women and children. And the first year, I went to Nicaragua. My girlfriend at the time and my two sons, we went and sort of initiated that process. And then the year after that, we went to Guatemala and then Colombia and then Peru a couple different times. And then when I started to lead with philanthropy, versus it just being for profit, something mystical happened in 2017. I'm turning 40 years old. And it just felt like it was literally on my 40th birthday, the day after, where I woke up and it felt like the void in my heart that I was always looking to fill, that I thought that external possessions and material gain would fill, all of a sudden it filled. And it just literally I was like, where is the void? Because I know that void would drive me, and all of a sudden it was like there was no more void. And I felt this frequency shift, It was like, what the heck just happened? Even more fluent in my language. And after that process happened, I was like, this is what Giving Business Soul is. It's about bringing philanthropy and this love for humanity in the way that you operate the business. And that then became sort of the point where I started to kind of feel more of what was coming through with Giving Business Soul. And I think when we met in 2018, it was already starting to kind of mold itself. Wasn't quite molded yet. It was like a fire hydrant, and I had concepts and I had these different things. But through my journey and, some of the stuff we talked about with lunch and even in relationships, different codes that I was gaining through these processes. And, it was a very mystical process of sort of following this organizing principle that we called it, right? And that Betty Kovacs calls it. And within about 3 years, that's where I said, listen, this is a great treasure. And it's not mine. This is coming through me. And I feel that other entrepreneurs have been looking for this. A modus operandi of how to function in business that actually is not only profitable, but at the same time fulfilling and purposeful. And then in 2021, a great friend of mine, Annabelle Viscara, excuse me, we decided to record a curriculum. And it's called the Roundtable Soul Accelerator Program, where we help entrepreneurs ultimately address some of these unresolved emotions within themselves, so that they can essentially heal and eventually, begin this process of reconciling their inner and outer worlds, and eventually, establishing businesses very similar to the Mortgage Phoenix Group, where they're profitable but philanthropic simultaneously.
Well, there's a lot of different threads here we've got on the table, and all of them are really important. And I think that's something that at the retreat we were at in 2018, when you're talking about tithing, and, this concept that I think has gained traction in the world in general more than what it was then, of not waiting until you have some success, or when I have this much money, when our business does this well, then I'll start helping and then I'll start giving to others. And some of my spiritual teachers in the past said, if you're ever experiencing lack of something, that precisely is what you need to give more of. If you have lack of money, you got to give it more. If you're experiencing lack of love, or you don't feel like you have enough love, you need to give that. So it's like giving that which you don't have is actually what starts that generation of flow of giving and receiving. And so I really love that concept of, giving into organizations and the philanthropic mode of operating. It builds a different energy, and it builds like a magnetic, this is the vision I have, is like this magnetic kind of vortex that can start moving much more than what we think on the external side of things. And, as we kind of go through some of these layers, I do want to rewind a little bit, because, the way that you tell the story now is very fluid and very smooth, but I can imagine at 27 and, going through those 3 years of what maybe we'd call like brutal initiations, that now when you look back, like you're, of course, grateful and see these things, and we can do that in life. But I think there might be a lot of people listening that are in that phase in some way, shape, or form. Like they've just come out of a relationship and they're devastated, or maybe they've just lost their businesses, which is probably a lot of people through the COVID era, and having to pivot in a really, really big way and start over again, like the phoenix that's on the wall here, that we can reinvent ourselves continuously. But it doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean it's not going to be painful or take a great amount of effort. And so there's this thread that I want to weave together a little bit in business and where you're at now and giving business soul. But I think this is something that a lot of people are starting to understand now, but the old systems or the old ways of doing things are still around. That when I see patients, I ask them about their life and their career and their mission and their vision. And they're like, well, what does that have to do with my health? I've got this faulty liver. And I'm like, oh, it has everything to do with it. What about your relationships? And so the pathway you've been on, going through those really dark times, digging more into traumas and realizing that you had traumas. And this is what I want to, maybe zone in on a little bit more. You mentioned, you started to cry more. And realized like, oh, I do have traumas, and I need to operate a little bit differently here. So from that point, this is the shift in business that can happen for people, that we can't compartmentalize anything. And so all of those things that were alive in your system needed to be addressed. And even going back to, uncovering things. Do you remember a moment where, was it just like the depression you're talking about, and just being really maybe lost and just maybe bewildered of what had just happened with all the success, and then suddenly it changed in every capacity, like the big ones, like relationships, health, and all the finance? Those are big ones. And so the spiritual nature, or maybe it was the foundation you had built of reading, and like you had enough awareness to know where to go. And so for some people that maybe don't know where to go, what was it for you in that time that maybe started you on that spiritual path of just pain, or a deeper impulse, or just serendipity, or maybe a bit of everything?
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you're bringing it back to that, because certainly, I feel that one of the things in my life is, I've gone through these things so that I could go and share those with others who are maybe experiencing them and are trying to find language for what's going on. And certainly at that time, one thing I certainly would say is that, it's really in those times, sort of that dark night of the soul, when your heart is broken, if you can understand that those are really gifts, that are cloaked in a lot of pain. And I look back at those times now and understand there was just so much beauty inside of those moments. And I believe that the greatest medicine makes its way into our humanity through the broken heart. So anytime you're experiencing those, it's like I sometimes pray for people's hearts to be broken, because when they start to break, as they start to open, and as they start to open, It's like there's these greater codes. And I believe that as that heart cracks open, it does almost start to unfold like a deeper calling, if you can just embrace and accept that. And at that time, I didn't really have language for these things. I was just in a sort of in a well of grief. It just felt like forever. I was like, how am I going to get myself out of this? From all the luxury to, couch surfing and literally moving to like 4 different places in 1 year and having my kids. I mean, it was rough. And at the time I ran into a group of ladies playing volleyball, and just in the way that they were talking and smiling and joyful, I was like, what is this? And they said, oh, we were graduates from the University of Santa Monica. And I was like, University of Santa Monica, what do they teach? And so that's where I feel like it was that impulse where I was like, what is this? And I just kind of followed that impulse, that organizing principle, that intuitive guide. And I found myself there in that program. And as I sat there, and started to really digest what the teachers were saying, and these are giants in consciousness, as I refer to them now, but there was just such an eloquence in the way that they were speaking and the succinctness about how they understood the inner world and the soul, that it just enamored me. And at the time, interestingly enough, Kevin, I haven't shared this, but I had a business coach at the time. And he was coaching me on mortgage and how to get back up, because I thought that that's what I needed. I was like,
that's what you knew.
Yeah, I knew. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, I need to get back on top. So let me get this business coach, and all of a sudden I get confronted with, the attendance of University of Santa Monica. And I tell my coach that, and he says, listen, you don't have time for that right now.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. He's like, you don't have time for that right now. We got to focus on this. I just sort of prayed about it, went inwards about it, and it was like the message was clear. This is what I got to do. So within some time, I untangled that business coach and just went all into the University of Santa Monica. And in that, it was like, as I started to really heal, I started to see the external expansion in business that my business coach could not get me.
Yeah.
Because I was still broken inside.
Yeah.
He gave me all the here's what you got to do at 8 a.m. and and it just wasn't yielding anymore because my inner world was a mess, know. And as I started to reconcile the pain, was what was starting to cause the external expansion.
Oh, yeah. Well, in the inner world, this is another piece that I feel like is so important here is for anybody out there, love coaches,
sure,
guides. I've had so much beautiful support from so many people and even loved ones around me where I started to feel something different or see something different than maybe they were seeing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the advice is, no, don't do that thing. And so that process, I think right now, a lot of people are really feeling that. And you talk about the inner world, you did some prayer, but do you recall anything else around that time that had you go directly against the coach that you had hired from a business point of view? Like you felt it, and I've come to know you more too, of the deep intuition and the practices and everything else. But at that time, that was probably a pretty big leap in your understanding to not go into the mortgages more, which is the old of what you knew and where your expertise was, and you had success. It would be so enticing to want to go back into that world. That would be the comfort, the old success, and it's like, oh no, I just need to get better at this business structure. And the way I'm seeing it is, that was the old paradigm of your life. And then you're at this major choice point that maybe you didn't even realize was such a big choice point at the time, or maybe you did, but something had you say, no, I'm not going to listen to this. You're listening to your inner world. Can you maybe just speak about that a little bit more? Because I think so many people are sitting in this doubt or indecision and are not trusting that deeper inner world voice. How do they get there more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's Robert Frost who said something to the degree, something around like he's walking into a forest and 2 roads diverged. I took the one less traveled, and that's made all the difference. And at the time I was into the poetry for whatever reason, and I remember that. And I also was really big in this Holy Grail legend of Percival, and going into the forest and into the unknown. And it was like, there was just this sense of an adventure and a calling. It was even more expensive. I think at the time it was like $800 a month to go do that versus I think, what I was paying the coach was like $500 or $600 at that time. It was more expensive, more time consuming. But listening to Robert Frost and taking that road less traveled and understanding the myth of Percival, that sometimes we need to venture into the unknown and into that mystery. And for me, that was that. And as I did and started to do that work and started to see, what it actually started to yield on the external, and it was very quick sort of feedback as well. Like as I started to address these things, all of a sudden it was like momentum started to come back, like life force started to come back. I was smiling all the time, but there was just a deeper joy that started to kind of exude from the smile and the eyes. And as I just continued on, it was that was really it. It was the myth in Robert Frost's two roads diverged. I took the one less traveled, and that's made all the difference.
Well, in the road less traveled, to me, this speaks of uncertainty and the unknown. You named it. Basically, each time I've had huge up levels in my life, it is often following a big heartbreak, and I've had several of those, no doubt. And then, there's different seasons in life that we go through, and there's, springtime shows up again, summer shows up again. And if you have a deep enough belief in yourself, you can take a risk into the unknown. But I see in society so much, and I was like this in the past too, like I needed control. I needed to know, with certainty, which is an illusion anyway, of the variables in my life. I've got to work on those to, create this illusion of safety and this illusion of security. And some of the experiences I've, been through, my greatest fears were realized and sort of losing everything and, coming back to it in a different way. But in that process of losing everything, I gained everything because it did point me to all those pieces that were unmet, unhealed, these aspects of my own behaviors or different things where I was sabotaging myself and I didn't even know. And also not allowing myself to think bigger and to allow more layers of success and the things that I was kind of holding. One of my favorite books is The Big Leap, and just over and over again, how we upper limit ourselves. And so I feel like there's some really beautiful points here around it does, and it is going to take a leap of faith for anybody that is ready to go to the next level, or you're in pain, or you're wanting to avoid pain, which is possible, I think, as we become more conscious. There's more fluidity, there's more synchronicity. It doesn't have to be such effort, but depending on where this meets you in this conversation, there's generally a leap of faith required where you don't have certainty, where it is the road less traveled. And I look at that in my life now as more adventurous. Like I'm excited about it, even if it's changed. Whereas in the past, so terrified of the unknown. And I think that is one of the biggest game changers I've seen for me anyway. And it sounds like for you is each time we can choose that, even if it's uncomfortable, suddenly things will start shifting. It's like the universe is meeting you, or your creator's meeting you and saying, I see that you're trusting a bigger picture here. Even if everybody around you is saying, you're crazy, man, don't do that. And I have had that at times and then question myself, am I? Great, is this a good idea? But only you can know at the deep level. And so I think that's something that I feel so resonant in your system, in your energy, is that you've learned how to trust yourself at a really deep level. And it doesn't mean life is perfect, doesn't mean we're gonna, get it right all the time. But there's maybe no such thing as getting it wrong, but there is the learning that can go along with it if we're willing to be uncomfortable for a time. And I'm not saying we have to always be in that, but that is where the sweet spot is of so much exploration of the soul, of life, of love, of heartbreak, but it brings so much more.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we venture into those unknown places, I mean, that's where we find the gold. I think Joseph Campbell says that really well, right? It's like the cave you fear the most holds your greatest treasure. And I think, when you... Yeah, and I think what might be worth saying here too would be this idea that typically the solution isn't somewhere where you go back into the same. It is a call into the adventure, into the unknown. And when you have the courage to do it, and I think that's also an interesting sort of frame to run through it. It's like expansion requires courage, right? And when you look at that map of consciousness, when you break out of that survival state of frequency, courage is sort of the marker that moves you into service, and you have to, it requires courage to go into the next sort of layer of your unfolding, because that's what it is, right? It's just spirals and layers of unfolding, and each of them requires that big leap, like you're saying, the courage to venture into the unknown. And I think the mystic, and those that are being guided by this sort of impulse start to get really comfortable in those waters. And it's not to say we were having this conversation, during our meal, but it's like, sometimes, it's like, if you don't feel like you're lost, you're probably not going in the right direction, because there's times where I'm just like, can I do this?
The questioning.
But, you question it, and it's overwhelming, and can I do it? But what I continue to find over and over again is that life meets you at this space where you commit. And when you do that commitment, it just continues to meet you right there. It's almost like, it reminds me as I'm saying it right now, remember in, I guess it's the Grail legend again, where it's the Indiana Jones. You remember that movie where they're looking for the Grail and they're got the map, and then there's this big old open area, and there doesn't seem to be a bridge.
The chasm.
The chasm.
The chasm we all face at
exactly,
times.
right? And he finally just takes the step, and it's like, dude, it's right there, right? And he's like, oh man, and he throws the sand, and now he can kind of see it, and I think that's really what it's like, and why wouldn't it be like that? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't it require, you to venture into the unknown and require you to take steps in directions that you would have never thought? That's what the myths tell us, and when you can get comfortable in that and sort of pushing on those edges a bit and just kind of going sideways a little bit and moving, and then when you feel that sort of divine hand of God just continuing to like breadcrumb you further and further into this mystery, then you start to feel that certitude. You start to feel like, oh my gosh, this is being held.
It's like a double layer, that there's the uncertainty on the top, but the deeper like soul wisdom and inner guidance is quite certain when you've done that level of work. Yeah. And I love that quote that you said, like, life happens at the point where we commit, or maybe you said it slightly different. Something like that. That hit me in my seat right now. And, you and I are both Gene Keys fans, and Gene Key 29, the Shadow's half-heartedness. Yeah. And what Richard talks about there too is, and I've heard this in other lineages, there's no such thing as like 60% commitment, 90, 99% commitment. There's only full commitment or not. Yeah. And right up to 99.9, there's still an element of not being fully committed. And I think when I look at some of the stuff that I've created over the last few years, or has been birthed through me, there was those choice points and some really hard ones of almost quitting. And then like coming down to that deep, gritty layer. Are you going to do this or not? And feeling that moment of, I need to commit to, bringing, in my case, I'm speaking about the New Human events, but so close to not doing it. And I was like 90%, but that 10% filled with all kinds of junk that tested every aspect of my system. And it made me make that choice to leap that extra 10% where there was full commitment. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this no matter what happens. And I'm just going to face the fears. I'm going to face the financial fears, or the embarrassment if it doesn't work. That's not going to feel good. Maybe it won't go really well. Maybe the event's going to be terrible and nobody comes or nobody buys tickets. But I remember that moment very distinctly because I was really sitting with it of, which direction do I go here? Do I turn left? Do I turn right? And it reminds me, we'll just quote movies all day here, but The Matrix, the first one where Neo's in the car and he stops. He's like, no, I can't do it. Let me out. Stop the car. They stop, and he opens the door and he almost gets out. And, she says, where that road leads. You've been down it so many times before. And that's kind of how I felt at that moment of, if I don't follow my heart's highest excitement here, then my true heart's desire of bringing something into the world like this, I can turn left, but I know where that leads. And that I'm not going to be okay with that. How am I going to know if I don't do it?
Yeah.
Even if I fail, if there is such a thing, I know I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. It's going to test me. And I thought, I'm okay with those things. And wherever I land, I'll figure it out. But at least I'll have learned something. And I didn't let fear come in the place of taking that full commitment. Not to say there's not places in my life right now where I'm not fully committing, because I can feel that too. But it built a new level of certainty to trust myself.
Yeah.
And as I'm saying that out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that is what it did. It gave me a deeper level of embodiment, but I had to do it.
Right.
I did have to fully commit.
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful. Yeah, and it's like, come what may, come what may. And I think when you start to move in the world in that way, I had the 28th gene key as my vocation. And so this is all about sort of like, it's the gift of totality, the shadow of purposelessness. And it's like when you move in the direction of something that you don't understand the outcome, you don't know where it's going, but you embrace it fully. And you just sort of, as he says, suck the marrow out of life. You begin to live a full and total life, and when you live that life, it's just like it leads you to the city of immortality, where you become one of those individuals that leaves their mark on our humanity, because you were willing to go, where there was no roadmap, and all the great endeavors in our world have always come through that pathway. It's like bringing the soul, the mythos, of who you are into the physical reality, to take what is, deep in the soul and birthing it into the physical world. And these individuals are the immortals, individuals that, again, leave their name in the tapestry of this great story that we're all writing at this time.
Wow, so well said. I love that. We're in the myth. We're in the following the Grail, and there is it feels like this parallel for both of us and others that I have in my life too, that there's something deeper driving them. There's a bigger picture, and one of those elements to me is service. That it becomes less about us as individuals and more about how do we support, guide, help. And we need to look after ourselves as we're doing that. To be of a greater level of service, you got to look after your own home first. Absolutely. You got to look after your body, your mind, your vessel, polish that mirror. And then as those frequencies shift and as we kind of clear the debris and the clutter, and we talked about that on your podcast, that things do start to open up. And it becomes more fluid. It becomes more graceful. And grace starts to find us in these moments of, huge amounts of gratitude for things that I've experienced now. But I could also feel the mirror on the other side of all the big challenges, or, being brought to, your knees metaphorically or physically at times. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. That door opens and something else is there waiting for you. And then there's another step and another step. And so I think from a business point of view, we're seeing a convergence of spirituality, of consciousness, of awareness, that it would naturally infuse at this great awakening time on the planet, that it would have to be infused in business. And we talked about it before of, you connecting with people and even employees and things, and maybe they're coming from a business background, and then they're starting to run across that bridge over into the mythical life, the magical life, the spiritual aspect, and realizing that these are two sides of the same coin in some way. And then actually that can actually be done together. It's not one or the other. And I feel like that old saying of, the old paradigm is like, oh, well, it's just business, to excuse shitty behavior or to excuse being out of integrity. And for a lot of us, that's not okay anymore.
Right.
That's not an excuse. It's just business. What about if we can say, oh, it's just business, and it means I'm meeting people at the heart level, I'm being of service, I'm tithing, I'm giving into causes that I really believe in, and through that vehicle, there's greater levels of health and vitality and connection and relationships. And I wonder, as I speak to these things, I just want to, pass this ball back to you, because this is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Please share more on that.
Exactly. Well said. Well, that's I think for so long we've been compartmentalized, and it's just been one or the other. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to show up this way in business because that's sort of the sort of structure or paradigm that was developed. And
it was acceptable.
Yeah, it was acceptable. And this is what we learned in the movies and all that we were taught and all that we were programmed. And it's like your spiritual nature is on Sundays or whenever you are and all this stuff. And
once a week you can be good over here.
Yeah, exactly. And then all the other days you have, this excuse over here. And I feel like in that process that I went through, to discover the truth of who I am, and as I sort of emerged out, it's like there was this desire to infuse these two. And as I like to say, it's like, when you study, any of the mystical cores of the great religions, there's this golden thread that runs through them. And ultimately, there is a sort of meta goal in consciousness. And that meta goal is that we're trying to bring together the masculine and the feminine poles within us, the light and the dark, the unconscious and the conscious, right? And this is what Carl Jung named individuation. It's psychological wholeness. There's actually a very structured process to do that. And so if that's really what we're attempting to do inwardly, then it would make sense that externally, eventually, through the law of correspondence, as above, so below, well, we would then attempt to bring the two seemingly independent types of organizations into union. And that's the business and the philanthropy. That's, business is masculine. It's linear, logical, about performance and getting things done. The philanthropy, the nonprofit, this is more feminine in its texture. It's about taking care of the whole, making sure everyone's well taken care of. But both of these types, they're both wounded. And as a result of that woundedness, they don't quite achieve the ideal that they set out to. So it's like, well, let's just bring these two into union, and let's bring our essence, our soul essence, our feminine essence into the business. And by doing that, you create an environment that's magnetic, that allows other people in the organization to evolve and grow. It's almost like we're starting to move from corporations to organizations, as I like to say, right? Corporations, corpse, dead entities, soulless entities, right? Into organizations, organisms. Organisms are powered by light. They're powered by this beautiful energy. And that's the process that we're in, is to make this leap from these soulless entities into these organizations that are imbued with light and with consciousness. And when leaders like yourself and what you're doing with your organization bring that essence, you create like this field. It's like a garden. And our role as leaders is to make sure there's the right nutrients in the soil, the right water and sunlight. And it's a place where people can evolve and mature and grow, because we're so much more attuned as leaders, since we are in the work of connecting to our hearts. People want to show up for organizations. They want to show up for leaders, and if you have the ability to be connected and emotionally intelligent and guide people through, it's like then the organization starts to have Richard talks about in the 7 gene key. It's like, I believe organizations in the future will essentially have a frequency to them. It's like, and the organization is composed of all the cells, within it, the cells being the people, right? So where's everybody at within the organization, right? And as leaders, if we can develop a culture and an environment where it's about evolution and about growth, then the sort of the energy that these organizations start to have, it's quite amazing. And people want to come into them. We're tired of working in the soulless entities. We want to work, and we want to know that we give our labor to a great cause, especially those that are beginning to understand that, we got to move this world into a better trajectory. And right now is the time, because right now business is the dominant power structure. This is a frame that I always share with people, but if you look at the largest buildings on the landscape, they'll always tell you that who holds the most amount of power. At the beginning of time, it was the kingdoms and the castles. Eventually, those give way to church buildings, and eventually those give way to capital state buildings of states and countries, right? But inside of kingdoms, churches, and government, you have to belong to bloodline to actually influence that power structure, right? But right now, when we look into that landscape, business buildings are the largest. And that, given the case, is that we have this window of time where we don't have to belong to any bloodline, right? Because all of a sudden, with this third industrial revolution, this decentralization, this evolution of consciousness, we're all wanting to aspire to entrepreneurship. And if we just take on that accountability and responsibility to bring a new consciousness into that, how rapidly can we begin to move this world into a better place? Imagine organizations doing good work like the Mortgage Phoenix, building homes for women and children, hyper profitable, but philanthropic simultaneously.
Yeah.
And if we can bring those two things into union, right? And I think we can move the herd the moment they understand, like, look, this model is not only philanthropic, will finally deliver you into the elusive elixir you've been looking for, which is fulfillment, and it will be more profitable for you, for humanity, and for everybody that works with you. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, it's the results speak for themselves.
Exactly.
And, I think we're moving into a time, and a lot of people are already moving this way, but, we talk about frequency, and friends of mine, we use this languaging. I've heard other people speak about it as like frequency is your currency. Mm-hmm. And the frequency of an organization, of a business entity, it's its own living, breathing, feeling machine.
Exactly.
And the vibration of that it moves into the world, either low or high, is actually going to win the day, in my view. I could be wrong, but a lot of the old paradigms and old ways of operational capacity that don't support the health and vitality of its components, of its employees, that's not going to stick around. And I mean, we've seen that over the last decade. You talk about Google or some of the other bigger, they got sleep pods, they got vacation whenever you want, because they started to realize those old rigid structures, people were not thriving in that. Exactly. And maybe it was actually leading to dis-ease and illness and low performance. So it might still be profit driven in some way that, healthier people actually perform better. Okay, like that's a decent metric. I'm not arguing with that. But in a bigger context, like heart-centered, healthy entrepreneurs make the planet better. Yeah. And that profit margin and the, giving into, places and spaces that really need guidance and support, and to bring them online as well. You can see the waves kind of moving out of all the people that you guys have built homes for, and being on the ground, grassroots, and doing that. There's a soul satisfaction in that. Because that can't be faked, and helping somebody out in that way and showing up and just having that as a way of life. I think this is the other thing. It's not one time a year you go and help somebody. How does this actually show up in your day-to-day life where, there's somebody at the coffee shop or whatever it is. You're like, nope, I'm not in my zone today. I don't help anybody the other 364 days. And so living this as a way of life does become deeply healthy. The cells respond to it. I've seen it in my work. I've seen it personally for me. I've seen it in patients where they start just opening up the energy flow in their lives a little bit more, and their businesses start to do well. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we're being asked to upgrade the way that we look at the world and the way that we view business in general. And I think ultimately people do want to have soul in everything they do. And as entrepreneurs, it's our way of sharing like who we are in the world and our contribution and how unique it is, or how it could be of service to the whole. And a friend of mine and a mentor, Philip McKernan, I interviewed him formerly on my podcast as well. We're in a group called Brave Soul in Ireland. This is a couple of years ago. Oh, cool. And somebody was bringing on a new business, and, kind of in the in-between of maybe leaving the business that they were in or exiting in some way and wanting to create something new. And he's like, I only have one question. And Philip is brilliant. And he says, I don't need to know what the business is or what you're doing or whatever. Just one question. Does it make the planet better? Does it make the world better?
Awesome.
That's all I need to know.
That's awesome.
And that deeply hit me. What a clarifying question.
Right.
And so a lot of us are asking these questions more now, and sitting with that is like, how does this contribute to health in society? Does it benefit more than just me? Does it benefit the Mother Earth that we're living on, who's begging for a change, from us? And so there's a lot more people being aware of that, and having that as maybe the guiding question is, how much money can we make? What if does this make the planet better? Let's start there. Is this of service at a high level? And then, maybe the other things are a little bit more secondary.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Great clarifying question for sure. I'm going to take that one if you don't mind.
For sure. It's from Philip.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. But yeah, no, I think that's a thing, because I have people come to me with business sort of ventures and ideas all the time. And typically it's like you can immediately feel the self-serving desire inside of it. And it's just like, that just doesn't interest me. Like, I don't care what the price tag is. There's just zero energy for it. Like, even though I know it could unlock X, Y, and Z financially, I can't, you know? And I think, to your point, at some point earlier in this conversation, but it's like, if we were to get off the path at this point, of this sort of impulse and this guide that the soul is leading us towards, it would literally probably just eat us alive. It just would not let us rest at this point, because we know that there's something greater that we are here to do. And in business, that needs to be the point now. It's like, look, we've seen what the old models do. We've seen it. And
we're living the results
of it. Yeah. And it's like, and again, whether you look at the Mayan prophecy, gene keys, everything, it's a time of synthesis. We're merging sort of these things, and certainly one of them that has to merge, if not, it's sort of really bad news for humanity. And that is that we have to bring this sort of the soul, this sort of tree of life, life affirming principles inside of business. And if we can complete that, that's my sort of like great vision. It is like, when we complete this, this, I believe, sets and begins an entirely new human story. One, as Richard said, lives as liquid memory within the cells and the DNA of us, that there is this ability for us to establish the great kingdom, and when enough of us start to sort of weave our soul inside of what we do and inside of business, that because what we're starting to find out is that authenticity, you could say that's the essence of your soul. Right? Your essence of your soul is your authenticity, and that is the highest vibration that we have, right? And when enough of us, are playing the song of our soul, this new great symphony will take over this earth, and a new story emerges. But enough of us have to do that work. Yeah. And I think what we're starting to find is that the treasure is inward. It's in facing these traumas and facing these things. These are gifts of God. We're emissaries of light. He said, hey, Kevin, take care of that. That's yours to take care of. Alchemize that pain into light. And when we do that and we start kind of going in that direction, it's like this great symphony takes this earth, and it's just like a new dimension surfaces,
Yeah. Well, I just want to pause with that and feeling a lot of energy move in the room and move through my body. It's like my body always tells me when there's great truth spoken, that frequency of authenticity of, I think some of us have touched into that in various ways, that we can see how possible it is. And we're touching into that more all the time. And, the choices that we're making matter. The individual actions of each of us matter. And it affects all of us, all around the world, all the time. And feeling that deep calling, sometimes it feels like quite a responsibility, but it's so exciting as well, of this time and space that we're in. And I think like the soul induction process, the individuation process, I generally can feel it in myself, and I can feel it in people that I'm close with and have great connections with, that a lot of us are feeling that frequency now. Yeah. And we're right there. And, it may be darkest before the dawn sort of thing, that there's some work to be done. But a lot of us, that it's almost like a choiceless choice. We've talked about that too, of I can't not go in this direction. you can't not go in this direction because it's a bigger picture. It's a deep calling. And I think that's what we're both feeling in this moment as you speak to these things, and like the emotion moving through. There's such like truth in it, and we're right at these doors right now as a species and as a planet, that there is choices that need to be made, and the forking of the species in different ways of what do we want to do from here.
Yeah.
And there's so many capable, amazing humans that we can create the heaven on earth. We can create these visions of the golden age and everything else. And it will take work and effort and choice every day to not give up and to persevere through that. And whatever challenges, like you said, come what may, we're still going to show up in it. And this is, I think, the part of leadership. Anybody that is guiding or leading in any capacity right now, we've all been tested many times, maybe more to come, but I know we can show up in it together. And Gene Key 45 is coming through right now.
Yeah.
And, for any of you listeners, right, you guys stop talking about Gene Keys. I don't even know what you're talking about, but some of you do.
Yeah.
Go check it out. But Gene Key 45, you don't have to know Gene Keys to know the word synergy. And the Acidic expression of that is communion. And we are here to be in community and commune with one another. And as we continue to raise that frequency, it gets better and it gets better. And we're raising, the collective. It feels like the tide is coming up, and that can lift all of us.
Yeah.
And especially if we're allowing that and choosing that through our daily actions, then we're in a powerful time.
Yeah, powerful time. And for those listening, just to give you encouragement, obviously, you're hearing Kevin, you're hearing myself, and, individuals that have been walking this path and can illuminate some of the things to look out for and what to expect with certain things. And I think one of the things that Richard says is like, we're all equal to the task that we're given in consciousness. We are all equal to the tasks that we're given in consciousness. So if you've incarnated at this time, in the time of the great turning, in the time of the great change, and it feels insurmountable, know that you have everything that you need. You've been given it, or else you would not be given the dream. You would not be given the vision. It's just, you have to trust, you have to commit, and if you do that, you will be met. And your work is needed more than ever. Whatever you're here to give the earth, it's the time. It's this moment we've been talking about, and all the stage is set. It's like, whether you look and tune into biblical prophecy, native tradition prophecy, even if you look at economics with Ray Dalio, the fourth turning, all of it is right now. And it's like, it's the most exciting time to ever be alive, because we are about to write a new script. And that script and that story is dependent on all of us, not one of us. Those that are here to do this work. Not everyone is. And I think that's an important aspect to understand. Like, we have to give everyone the divinity of their own process. Some people are here to wake up fully into this reality, and some people are not, and that's okay. Just do you, stay in your lane, and know that there's, a ton of support in the unseen realms as well as here on the physical earth. Everyone is championing this great turning. It's beautiful, mystical, beautiful, heartbreaking, all of it, but it's just, that's the beauty, that's the ecstasy, right? It's just like being able then to hold the entire spectrum of the tragedy and the beauty of all of it. And and it feels fantastic to be able to like sift through it all and take it all in.
This is full spectrum living that we're talking about, and I know that's what I want in my life. And for Giving Business Soul and some of what you are working on, and courses or programs, you have your podcast as well, which is beautiful. Yeah, just share with our listeners like some of the things you're working on right now, opportunities, if this is striking a chord with them from a business point of view, and share some framework around that and some of the projects and things. Love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, so the big thing, as I mentioned, we created a curriculum called the Soul Accelerator Roundtable Program. It's obviously based on the Roundtable and the myth of the Grail and seeking this Grail. But the real work, I feel like that's a great course, and it's an introductory to all of this. But my book is really, I think, something that I've been shared with many times and feel it very intuitively. That's really the big piece of why I'm here, is to bring this archetype into human awareness. So the book is called Giving Business Soul: The Rebirth of the Merchant. I'm in the 6th chapter, and it will have 7. And what I'm bringing back to human awareness is a lost archetype. And so what I feel is necessary for this evolutionary trajectory of the entrepreneur is we need an archetype. And up until now, we've been void of an archetype as entrepreneurs. And as a result, we look out into the world and look into the Jeff Bezos and the Zucks and the Musk and say, okay, that's got to be the way to go. But instead, I feel like we need something that cannot be corrupted, something that exists sort of in the spiritual domain. And archetypes exist in that plane. And it's really interesting. Carl Jung has this really beautiful quote that I can't quite, language perfectly, but it's this idea that archetypes exist like waterways, and then that at some point they may dry themselves up, but when necessary, like a new waterway will find its way to that archetype to bring it back into human awareness. And through my own internal pathway, that's what revealed itself to me. Almost 10 years of contemplation of like, what is this thing, and eventually it surfaced. And so for those listening, what a merchant is, when you look up the etymology of mer, it comes from the word Merkaba, which means light, spirit, body. And so what a mer is light. And what a chant is the devotional song to the divine. And so what a merchant is he or she who is devoted to the light, right? It's the devotee of the light who uses their business in a benevolent way, who uses their business as a force for good, as a force for God, right? And I believe that I'm here to sort of do the clarion call to the merchants who remember who they are and why they've come, right? And when enough merchants sort of wake up and remember why they're here, this is when we will conduct commerce together, right? Commerce is another word that you can open. Com from community or, communion, it's a coming together. Mer, again, is light. Commerce, Earth, is the goddess known as Mother Earth, right? So it's going to be those who are coming together in the light for Mother Earth, right? That is, and the gift you gave me from Autumn Sky, it literally is very similar to the vision that I had, which is it's merchants activating the archetype, entrepreneurs activating this archetype within themselves. So this archetype becomes like an internal North Star that guides the soul-centered entrepreneur. And when enough entrepreneurs wake up into this, they become pillars, pillars of light, and it's like a new sort of Indra's net over the earth, and they're going to be holding the frequency of Sophia, of wisdom. No longer will we create businesses from the lower chakras, right, for survival, for pleasure, or for power. Instead, we will have made the ascent into the higher domains of wisdom, into Sophia. And the merchants, I believe, are here to remember this task that we have and begin to, establish organizations in this way. And ultimately, I feel like that's been, the journey I've been on. That is my role, is to bring this archetype back into human awareness so that we have assistance from the unseen realm to assist this process of rebirthing this great earth into its higher frequency.
Wow. That sounds amazing. And I can feel that the whole time you're talking about it. I feel it moving in this space. And my sense is that, like, the face of business is going to completely transform in the next, 4 or 5 years. It's going to be unbelievable.
Yeah.
And we're right there. We're right in that turning right now. And yeah, I think the thing that I'm also feeling is that deep soul satisfaction when you're deeply connected to your mission. and there's no wavering in that. There's no doubt in that. It's it just is. And been, given these soul missions, the mantles to put on if we choose to carry that forward. And, that's a soul purpose level, and it feels different than just doing business, Yeah. And I'm deeply grateful for this conversation. I'm deeply grateful for you and the work that you're doing in the world to, bring business to a higher frequency, to give it that soul. And I'm really excited to see what comes through you and your organization and the people that you have here over the next, 3 months, 6 months, over the next few years, that it's going to be a fun journey together.
Yeah.
And so excited to be here for all of it. The greatest show on earth is what's happening right now, definitely. And that we get to have conversations like this at this time, and, put it out there, and, create some beauty on this planet.
Absolutely, bro. Well, thank you for this podcast, for the conversation, for teeing up just fantastic, questions to, help me sort of share what I have to. And so if you've been hearing what you've been hearing and you feel a resonance, certainly go to the Giving Business Soul website, check it out. There's the curriculum, and now we just activated the next curriculum, which is the Path of the Merchant. For those individuals that feel that deep calling, like they are one of these merchants and want to join the community so that they can receive the frameworks of how to move in this way, how to establish an organization that is of the color violet. And we have that all within the community. And it's, this is my life's work. And thank you all for listening. And again, thank you for having me as a guest, brother. Appreciate you and appreciate all that you're doing. And it's going to be a fun ride, locking arms here on like the front ends of consciousness here on the battlefield of God, and, bringing it all forward, man. So it's great to have another warrior brother alongside.
Yeah, I see you. Yeah, and thank you. Thanks to everybody listening for this episode. It's always a journey for us as well. And here we go. We'll see you on the flip side. Thank you.
Much love, everybody.
All right.